let's start. Good afternoon again. Buenas tardes from Bogota. I have about half an hour in which I'm going to tell you a bit more about the subject I mentioned. Let's see. Moments. Okay. Something very brief about our organization. For some of you, you might have heard of the Holland Colombia. We are an organization that started in 2013, a little over 7 years ago, to promote trade, investment, and all kind of cooperations between the Netherlands, Curaçao, Aruba, and Colombia. That's our focus. That's what we aim for. Much has happened since. I myself have been living in Bogota for 7 years now. 7 years in which the relations also between Colombia and Curaçao have become commercially much more intense in a positive way. I'm going to tell you a bit more about that. But I think important for you to know that the Holland House was actually the first one of the new kind of bilateral chambers of commerce the kingdom wants to have all around the world. Colombia was the first one to have a Holland House. Today, there are many more. You might have heard of my colleagues in Panama or in Mexico or in Chile. So today, there are much more Holland Houses, but actually the one in Bogota, we were the first one. I don't want to say the original one because we are all original, but it was the first one. And we have been working for 7 years now in promoting the commercial relationships between Colombia and the Caribbean parts of the kingdom. And our relationship with Curaçao has been strong from day one. We have had some comments about the name of our organization that was chosen before I came here, but of course now we are happy with that name. But I want you to know that for us and for me personally, from the moment I arrived to Colombia 7 years ago, our focus has been to make companies, entrepreneurs on Curaçao aware of the opportunities that Colombia could generate. And we found the best possible partner in Curaçao. They actually knocked our door right from the beginning, and it is the Curaçao Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It's been a founding member, board member of our organization. Billy Jonker has been in our board almost from the beginning. So we have a very strong relationship with Curaçao. And to give you an idea of some of the results of the past years. So when I first came to Curaçao I think in 2013, we started to tell companies on the islands that there are opportunities to sell, to buy, to invest, to attract investment related to Colombia. And we actually had to do a lot of promotion because although Colombia and Curaçao are neighboring countries, many entrepreneurs on Curaçao thought that it would not be easy, or they didn't think of Colombia. Now, 7 years later, there's much that has changed. I think the message that we were sending out together with the Chamber of Commerce Curaçao has actually catched on quite well. A lot of companies from Curaçao have become active here. Here are some of the main milestones since or in the last years. We have had over 6 trade missions. We have had 15 companies from Curaçao that actually opened an office in Colombia, are employing people here. Actually, many of them, because we are talking about a very big market. So when the success is growing in the Colombian market, of course, their local office here in Bogota, Medellin, or one of the other cities actually become quite rapidly also big offices. We have had about 135 companies from the islands that for the first time have shown interest in exploring, which I think is a very important number. And we have had also a lot of companies from Colombia. So Colombian exporters, investors that have become very interested in the local market in the Caribbean. So also a very big number of Colombian companies we are bringing into contact with the right partners on Curaçao in this case. So that's a bit about milestones of what we have done with all the partners we have on the island. I mentioned the chamber, but we work very closely together, and that's also why this webinar today, we are doing it with two more speakers, which actually have their very specific expertise, because we believe in working together. Here are some more figures. The Colombian investment in Curaçao in 2019, something we are also working on to make more Colombian companies aware of investment opportunities. Colombia is one of the top 15 export destinations for Curaçao-based companies. And if you look at imports, so what Curaçao is buying in Colombia, Colombia is in the top 10 of suppliers. Here are some of the main products that Curaçao is buying in Colombia. Well, I think many of the products are quite well known to you. So that's to give you a first impression. From this point on, I will talk about, I think about 10 minutes, I want to talk about the Colombian economy. The Colombian economy, and tell you a bit more about its structure, about what I think makes Colombia a very attractive economy. And of course, also, we cannot forget about the current circumstances. So I'm also going to talk a bit about COVID-19 and its impact. I think Colombian economy, you know the country, 50 million inhabitants, big country, unique country in diversity. I think some of the keywords of the Colombian economy would be the economy has been growing for many years in a row. It's a stable economy. The stereotypes of the past, which you all know and you can still find on Netflix. The current context, political, socio-economic, is much different. Colombia is a stable economy. Colombia is an important emerging market in the world. Colombia last year became part of the OCDE. So Colombia is today an economy, stable, growing, and I think some of the unique factors are the geography. Colombia, you can find any type of climate, you can find it in Colombia, from very cold to very warm, a very tropical climate. And Colombia is the only country with direct access to both oceans. So that makes that Colombia is a unique country, well positioned, and with a lot of opportunities for international trade. And I think that's the other characteristic I want to highlight as being very open. If you look at Latin America in the past 10 years, you see that governments have changed, of course, but you see that some of the economies have been rather closed, have been more protectionistic, like for example, Brazil, Argentina, or Venezuela in the most extreme sense, while Colombia and, for example, also Peru have done the contrary. Colombia has become much more open for the world. If you look at free trade agreements, there's no other country in Latin America that has so many agreements with different countries and continents. So Colombian economy stable, growing, and open for the rest of the world. And not to forget neighboring country of Curaçao. So that I think that's the setting. That's the setting why I think the commercial and economic relations between Curaçao and Colombia are excellent, but I think there's much more we can do together. That's my aim. That's my personal goal to, of the many participants we have today, that some of you in the very short term become active here. Here about the Colombian economy, if you put it into global context, today it's the economy number 32 in the world, the fourth in Latin America, after Brazil, Mexico, and Argentina, the fourth biggest economy. I think the other, like I already mentioned, a very open economy. If you look at the World Bank has a very nice index that you might have seen, aimed at explaining to companies and to organizations how easy it is to do business in a country. If you then look at Latin America as a whole, you see that that Colombia, together with Chile, with Panama, and with Mexico, are normally the country's best positions. Here we see some of the individual indexes getting credit, protecting minority investors. And we see that Colombia is very well positioned and is one of the more business-friendly economies in Latin America. Then this is a slide, of course, pre-COVID-19. Here what we see is the GDP, the real GDP growth in 2019, so last year. And then we see that Colombia, together with Peru, were the top performing economies in Latin America. We see that other economies, Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela, of course, also there at the end, has a year that was not really comparable to Colombia. So Colombia and Peru of the best performing economies last year. This was the tendency in the past since 2011. We see that Colombia, when I arrived to Colombia in 2013, we were still growing at 5% a year. That last year we were at 3.5 more or less. The forecast for 2020 was that Colombia would grow about 3.7%. So really in line with the growth of last year. Of course, that has changed. So until this point, we are talking about the situation until March of this year, when everything seemed to be going quite normal. Then COVID-19, of course, also impacted heavily on Latin America from mid-March, like is the case for Curaçao. The number of infected persons increased, and countries took different types of measures. Colombia was one of the most strict countries, like is also the case, for example, for Panama or for Peru. So Colombia, in the first week of March, I was still able to travel. And the third week of March, everything was closed. So from flights to schools to stores, everything was closed and everybody had to work from home. From beginning of June in Colombia, we started to bit by bit to reactivate the economy. But the difficult thing is that the number of infected persons has only started to grow since then, because we had 2.5 months of lockdown with not that much infected persons. But of course, when we opened in June, that started to increase quite rapidly. That's the situation today. In Colombia, we're getting to the peak now. In Curaçao, I hope you have had the peak and everything will go this way forward. But here in Colombia, we are still facing temporary lockdowns, measures, and we are only now getting to the peak. But in general, I think the Colombian government acted quickly, bought some time to prepare the hospitals better for what was coming. And hopefully we can really look forward again soon. What we see here, while I was talking a lot about the current situation, what you can see here is the World Bank and the impact they see for Latin America. Here we see the different economies, and we see Colombia. On the right side in orange, you see the expected growth, which would be the 3.7% I showed on the previous slide. And on the left side in red, you see the actual forecast by June 2020, which would be a -5% for the Colombian economy this year, which of course has a very big impact. But if compared to the other countries, we are doing quite well. On the next slide, we see more or less the same, but we also see the forecast for next year. And then we see that Colombia, the impact this year will be, when compared to the other countries, will be okay. We also see that recovery in Colombia will take some time. It will take some time, and that also means that the forecast for 2021 is not that positive. But of course, like you see in blue, growth is again expected next year. So that's in macroeconomic sense, that's the situation, that's the forecast. Colombia impacted, like all the countries in the whole world, impact that's going to hit hard. But on the other hand, Colombia entered the crisis we are currently facing in better conditions than other countries on the continent. Colombia, in the first 3 months of the year, still grew 1.1% its GDP, while other countries in Latin America already had a negative growth. So that's the situation. It will take time for the recovery, but Colombia might have been better prepared than other countries in Latin America. Well, then getting back to other characteristics of the Colombian economy. Colombia is a big country. I already mentioned 50 million inhabitants, which makes it in population the third country in Latin America. Colombia is many more than that. Colombia is also today one of the countries that attracts a lot of foreign investment in many industries. I will give you an idea of in what sectors the investment is taking place, but it's quite diversified. And for example, if you look at the investment from the Netherlands has become one of the 5-6 main investing countries in Colombia. And Colombia on the continent would be the third recipient of foreign investment after Brazil and after Mexico. Then a bit about the sectors. Traditionally, Colombia attracted a lot of investment in the oil and gas and in the mining industry, which were the commodity-based industries. That was 20 years ago. Almost all the investment that came to Colombia went to those sectors. But if you look at today, you see that the investment is taking place in many, many more sectors and what we call the new sectors of the economy. So you see your software and IT, orange economy, of course, the agricultural sector, very important for the future of Colombia, being a country with a vast amount of agricultural grounds and availability of different types of climates. So a lot of new sectors that have quickly become very important also in the foreign investments. I already mentioned it. Colombia in the past governments has been very much focused on signing free trade agreements with many countries in the world. So today, Colombia has a free trade agreement with the United States, with Canada, with the European Union, South Korea, with almost all the countries on the Latin American continent, which actually makes Colombia also a great commercial hub for other countries in the region. So we have also seen many companies from Curaçao that opened an office in Colombia, and from the office in Colombia are also serving the markets in Central America or in Peru or Ecuador. So Colombia is actually also a great location to do business with other countries in the region. And for Colombia, Curaçao is the same, but aimed at the Caribbean. Many Colombian companies are investing abroad, are selling their products outside of Colombia today, and are looking for more commercial foothold in the Caribbean. And I think there we have been able to position Curaçao, but we could do much more. We could benefit much more from that interest Colombia has in the Caribbean region. Well, I mentioned investment. Another thing to mention would be tourism, which of course at this moment there's no tourism, but Colombia last year attracted more than 6 million tourists, which is actually more tourists than Peru, for example, had. So a lot of tourism also coming to Colombia today. And Colombia has also quickly become a very popular and very dynamic and a very productive location for many startups. Startups that, international startups, also local startups that have chosen Colombia as being the base for their operations. Here we find some of the examples of the many Colombian startups that today are quickly growing, are also active outside of Colombia. And I think that's also something we could connect much more, the startup ecosystem of Colombia and all the creativity and all the business mindedness that exists on Curaçao. So I think there's also much if you look specifically at startups, I think there's much more we could also do and maybe find new ways to work together. Well, that's a bit about the Colombian economy. So Colombian economy, open, stable, markets very nearby for Curaçao. And that's what I want to zoom in on the rest of my presentation, because I think we have been able to attract and to establish new business relationships in the past 7 years, but there's much more we can do. And that's also the reason we are doing this kind of webinars. We feel that many more companies from Curaçao could benefit from the different perspectives and opportunities Colombia is offering. So what you will find on this slide is a bit what traditionally Curaçao is selling to Colombia. So if you look at the exports from Curaçao to Colombia, what kind of products do you find? Well, here you find the main examples. So you find oil and gas, tobacco, but you also find, for example, products we have been working with quite a lot in recent years. Everything related to personal care, cosmetics, but for example, also home appliances and kitchenware. A lot of companies on Curaçao buy or in some way assembly this kind of products on Curaçao. Normally they buy them from different parts of the world. The products are being used in the hospitality sector or in other sectors in Curaçao, but then they find out that the same products could also have a very good opportunity in Colombia. So we have been working with quite a lot of these companies selling personal care products, home appliances, kitchenware. These kind of products, we really feel that if they work on Curaçao, you don't have to be the manufacturer, but if they work on Curaçao and you can get in some way the exclusivity also to commercialize those products in Colombia, we feel that could be a very good opportunity. And we have many examples today. Well, I already spoke about the impact of COVID-19, but if we look at impact in opportunities, like in the whole world, there are some sectors that, of course, now more than ever are interesting and actually are selling more than before, which would be everything related to IT and automatization of processes, which has been very quickly has become important here as well. So everything related to depending less on people, which in Colombia, which is still quite a manual country with a lot of labor and low labor cost in some way. Everything related to being able to manage a company from the distance, making it more digital. That's where we see a lot of opportunities, and that's where we also feel that some things that on Curaçao you feel are very normal and must also exist in Colombia, they are not always there yet. So everything related to making companies or organizations and also in the hospitality industry more digital for the future, that's something that has actually been growing. Well, from the traditional export from Curaçao to Colombia to the opportunities specifically in times of COVID-19, I always like to end this kind of presentations or introductions, I should say, trying to summarize where I see the opportunities. So if you ask me, where are the main opportunities for the people that joined this webinar today in or related to Colombia, I see three main fields of interest. I think they are described here. Curaçao, the Caribbean is the market, Colombia is the market, Netherlands, Europe is the market. I will explain in the next slides what I mean by that. But in summary, I think the first one, so Curaçao, Caribbean is the market. You should think that Colombia has many, many companies. Colombia is a big country with very innovative companies and very big companies that only now have started to also expand internationally. So only now they have started to grow their activities outside of Colombia, and they're looking for markets. And we have seen that many entrepreneurs from Curaçao have benefited from that because they saw a Colombian company with products that are highly demanded in Curaçao, but also the rest of the Caribbean. So the rest of the Dutch Caribbean, but also in Dominican Republic or in Trinidad and Tobago. So also they saw an opportunity to convert themselves into the sales office for these Colombian organizations in much more than only Curaçao. So that's the first opportunity I see. And then you can think of many Colombian companies from many sectors. So for example, to mention some, everything related to food products, but also fashion and textiles. So that kind of sectors where Colombia is quickly getting a bigger market share internationally, I think there's an opportunity. So that would be the first one. The second group would be Colombia as the market. That's the case for the companies on Curaçao that have developed a product, a service, a solution, and also want to sell that solution in Colombia. And I think that might sound, for many in the beginning, that sounded like impossible. How are we going to sell our product in a market of 50 million inhabitants? But if you look at the proof of concept we have today, many companies from Curaçao have actually been able to start to sell their products here. And then the third one, I think that's that could be interesting for the future, because if you think about the same Colombian companies that want to expand internationally and you can help them in the Caribbean, why not help them in Europe as well? You speak the languages, you understand people in the Netherlands much better than the Colombians do. So why not think big and think of the Netherlands, Europe also being a market? Well, that's the three categories I want to go into a bit more. I already mentioned Curaçao is the market. Please also think that it could be the point of entry, but also the rest of the Caribbean could be served from Curaçao, like a trade function. And I think this is basically the easiest one. You are already based on Curaçao. We could help you find the right Colombian suppliers. If you know there's an opportunity here for cosmetics products for tropical climates, we will find you the right Colombian supplier that wants to grow internationally. And from that, you could also think of the rest of the region. Then Colombia as the market, I think this is the second one. This is the one that we have been focusing on with the Curaçao Chamber of Commerce, because we feel many more companies on the island should think of exporting their products or services to Colombia. Here are some of the sectors we see opportunities. Personal care, I already mentioned, hospitality, but of course also the financial sector and the other sectors here mentioned. And I would summarize that as export of services. Of course, there are some exporters that have a very tangible product, but I feel that in general, Curaçao is developing itself also into a service economy, and many of the services developed on the island could very well be exported to Colombia. And service can then also include, like, for example, IT solutions, in which we have seen a lot of great companies from the island that are today very successful here. Well, this is the last slide before wanting to give you some practical tips. Here you find maybe a little bit more of perspectives. Curaçao is a very good name in Colombia as being part of the kingdom. And the kingdom is very well known in Colombia being a very important trade partner. The Netherlands is one of the 5 or 6 biggest investors in the country. The Netherlands is one of the top 3 export destinations for Colombia. So if you look at where does Colombia sell its products, you will find United States in the first place. Then normally you will find China. And the third country to which Colombia most sells is the Netherlands. So there's a very strong relationship there, which gives you a perfect basis for expanding. And of course, you have many advantages I didn't have when I came to Colombia. I had to learn Spanish. I'm still struggling a bit sometimes. You don't have that problem. You speak the languages. You know both cultures, so you understand a Dutch person like me very well. But you also quite quickly are able to understand culturally Colombian businessmen. That's something Dutch persons don't have. So you could be the perfect middleman, the middleman from here to the Caribbean or from here to Europe, but you could also be the perfect middleman the other way around. So you could also look for Dutch companies. There are many very big Dutch companies that are not active yet in Colombia. So you find one of them and you can start to sell their products or services in Colombia. That would also be a very interesting opportunity. It might sound strange, but we every time have more entrepreneurs on the island that actually start to look for interesting Dutch companies that are not active yet in Latin America and start to represent them here, which could also be, I think, a very interesting opportunity. Well, it's not time for thank you yet, but to conclude, and I'm going to look one moment at a time. Yes, I'm within time. I would like to share you 3, I think, very important and hope-giving recommendations to finalize my presentations, and afterwards I will be back for questions. But I think, of course, these are difficult, these are challenging times in Colombia, in Curaçao, in the whole world. But I think there are 3 factors which I think do help us. I think when we have this kind of crisis, all countries become a bit more nationalistic. So we start to buy our own products first, or we try to look for solutions and partners nearby home. And I think Colombia and Curaçao being neighbors, I think that's something that is quickly becoming even stronger. So helping your neighbors, I think it's really true in practice. So I think that's the first one. The second one would be that I have seen that Colombia, in a period of 3 to 4 months, which would be from today going back 4 months, the digitalization in Colombia in 4 months has been more than in the past 5 years, I would say. So when in December or in November, we were trying to propose to a Colombian company that there was not going to be a visit, that we were proposing a Skype call or a Zoom call, they normally said, no, tell us when the businessman is visiting our offices and we will make some time. But the openness to digital meetings, to finding each other on Zoom or on Skype or on Teams or all the other systems or platforms that exist today, there was not a lot of openness here. Today, all the Colombian companies, they actually don't want to go back to the office yet. So the digitalization of processes, but also the openness of meeting with new suppliers or business partners from outside of Colombia has very quickly grown. And I think that's good news, because today, still formally, Colombia says the 1st of September, we will get possibly flights again, international flights coming in and out. But I think it's going to be November. So, and even from that point onwards, before we get back to a certain type of normal, it will take time. So the digital way that you can today do negotiations, business meetings, I think is also a positive factor. And 𝗵𝗵𝗴, who is going to be the person speaking after me, is also going to tell you a bit more about digital marketing. And I think that's very much related. What you can reach today and achieve today from Curaçao without the need to travel, doing digital marketing in the right way, aimed at the Colombian market, can be very effective. Before giving the word to Peter, one more also a positive note to finish. In these months, we have had the opportunity to work some of the new RVO. RVO is Rijksdienst voor Ondernemend Nederland, and they have the SIB vouchers, Starters International Business Vouchers, and they are applicable for entrepreneurs on Curaçao. And we actually have had the chance to work with the first companies from Curaçao in obtaining an SIB voucher and exploring the Colombian market with that voucher with them. So I think also some of you might have heard of the SIB voucher, but we hope that some of you that want to really make work of the Colombian market, please take into account SIB voucher. If you put on Google SIB voucher RVO, you will find it. It's a very attractive instrument to be able to explore the Colombian market with us and actually get a very important incentive from the government. So also please take a look at those. I'm going to be back if there are specific questions for me, but I think this is the point to give the words to Peter, who's going to talk to us specifically about how to do digital marketing in Colombia, which I think is a great opportunity in these times. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jan-Willem, for the nice introduction. Thank you, the Chamber of Commerce and Holland House, for giving me the opportunity to talk about this topic. Let me share the screen quickly. Where are we? Yeah. Did I share the screen? Everybody can see it? Jan-Willem, if you will not, then I know. You see this?
I can see it, Peter.
Okay, great. Let me talk about the experience in Colombia. I am living in Curaçao since 1999, and in 2002 I started my own company. Used to be 𝗵𝗵𝗴 as a graphic designer that I started, but quickly we grew into a company from now with 7 persons, part marketeers, part designers, for which we do campaigns for clients based in Curaçao, but also in the Netherlands and in Colombia as well. Our main topics is that we say we design, we do online marketing, and we have fun since 2002. In 2014, I visited Colombia for the first time, and I was amazed about the country, about the nature, about the climate, about the kindness of all the people, but also how modern Colombia can be as well. So it triggered me to become part of the Holland House and discuss with Jan-Willem about the opportunities, and thanks to him, we found some partners along the way to collaborate, and now we do different projects with them. So, and as I only have 10 minutes only speaking time, I will rush through my presentation. To set up a nice and really good online marketing, we always say you need a good strategy first. So with the strategy, we really dive into what is your goal and why do you want to push your product in Colombia, and who do you think they will be buying? We help you with defining your target group, and we will define which channels to use and what your budget, depending on your budget. And furthermore, how to proceed. It's really important on the online marketing to managing expectations. There are some myths about online marketing, that it's cheap, that's quickly, and that it's easily to adapt yourself, but I can presume it's on the contrary. There is no quick fix, and online marketing is a marketing which needs to grow. So you really have to invest, as next to money, time in online marketing. Because without the right strategy, you will only capture a small percentage of your prospects. Leads will abandon your sales funnel. Your sales will not be focused on the right leads. And you will be missing chances for upselling or cross-selling. There will be a less chance on renewals or lower client activity. And without analytics, there will not be proper return of investment insights. This is a general thing about strategies, not specifically for Colombia. But what is specific as for Colombia is to talk about content. You have to be genuine, but also what Jan-Willem already mentioned, in Colombia there are 50 million people living. And if you see how big the country is, there are a lot of differences in how the people are living. There are city people, there are city peoples on the Caribbean coast, they're on the north, they're on the south. It's everybody is really, really different. So if you want to go specific, it's really important to do a good market research and what the demands of the people are. For instance, if you aim only for the middle class of the 50 million people, it's about 30% will be the middle class in Colombia. You still talk about 15 million people divided all over the country. So some tips and tricks are, you have to use authentic quality content. You have to offer solutions. Especially you have to show interest in Colombia. We are always using local copywriters. Sometimes even for each region, but especially for each target group. And you have to stay consistent. You have to use your marketing calendar. If you make a strategy, you also demand on what you will place throughout the year, or throughout the periods you want to push your product. And you have to stay consistent in that. We also have some tips about things you don't have to use. You don't have to mention negative topics. People in Colombia are very proud on their country. And as Jan-Willem already said, the Netflix shows with Narcos and etc., those are topics they don't like to talk about. So leave it that way. Also about the poverty or about the criminality. Don't push your product too much. And with that, we say don't rush up. People in Colombia take time to choose, and it depends on very different topics while they want to talk with you, or why they want to talk about your product. Funny thing also is, if you're going to visit Colombia and you talk with your clients, it's good not to make an appointment on a Monday, because in Colombia there are a lot of public holidays on a Monday. People love to have a long weekend in Colombia. Also, never insult Colombia. We are above Colombia. They like to learn a lot from us. They are open for it, but we have to level between Colombians and us, the 𝗄𝗏 people, but also the European Dutch people. Also, never use Google Translate. It's really poor. Better, invest in a good copywriter than think, ah, this Spanish is easily, I can just push it on the market in Colombia. Even the Spanish from Spain is not exactly the same as the Colombian Spanish. And don't be a scammer. There's something that's of course is worldwide, but it doesn't work. The next thinking of an effective online marketing is you have to measure everything. And that's the perfect part of the online marketing. When you put an ad in the newspaper, or if you are on the radio, it's more difficult to measure the effect of the advertisement, which mostly are on big budgets. Here you can, on the online marketing, you can really say, if I push $10 or $100 on it, how much will it earn? And it's important, if you do the analytics, that you can divide your buyer's journey into 5 different parts. First part of a buyer's journey will be awareness, and I won't go through each column, but the awareness is easy to measure on your impressions and our reach. The buyer's journey for consideration will be easy to measure on the number of engagements and types of engagements. And the decision part of the buyer's journey on the link clicks, how many people convert into a sell. If you talk about adoption, you can easily measure the positive mentions and the customer care metrics. And advocacy, you can inspire evangelism, who will be like a brand ambassador. You can measure the earned impressions and the earned reach. The most, if you go to online marketing, the most important part is to capture the people who are interested, to convert them into clients, and to optimize your strategy all along. For that, we at 𝗶𝗶𝗴 are using a tool, and we are using the tool of marketing automation. And why do we use marketing automation? Marketing automation offers you more leads, not only more, but really the ones who convert. And we make conversions to sales because we give the prospects the right message at the right time, which makes the sale. And by optimizing this all the time, we measure what works and what not, and we will adapt. So all the time we twist and shape into the perfect mix. And the perfect mix is only also something about time. It won't be the perfect mix for many years. You have to invest time and money in it to continue your sales. There are many parts how you can do the online marketing. You can do an email marketing. You can build landing pages on your website. There are forms people can fill in. There are, of course, the social tools for Facebook, for Instagram, etc. You can really measure them too. Of course, the CRM. We can have the analytics and testing of Google Analytics and etc. We can even measure the anonymous web visitors and the blogs. Well, what goes wrong if you put everything in place? You work as a marketeer or as a company on multiple contracts and costs. There are multiple apps which you need to manage. And the connections between the apps are not always 100%. Furthermore, you will develop very different databases for your clients or your prospects. And each of those databases will have or will have not analytics. And compliance is not possible, and that will be a big issue in the upcoming years. People want to know what you know about them, and they want to know if they unsubscribe, for instance, that they are really gone. And who do you call when things break? So with all this, the amounts of programs are not manageable. Now the commercial part of my story is that we are using 𝗄𝗶𝘶 because it's a fully integrated marketing automation. We only pay a monthly fee. It's a user-friendly platform. Everything is connected and seamless. There's a unified database, which is really important. And the unified analytics will show you the end-to-end return of investment. And it's compliance friendly. If people want to unsubscribe, they're really gone. There's an unlimited support for the entire app. And marketing automation has been proven because there's a 50% increase in sales-ready leads if you use it. There's a 60% higher lead to sale conversion. And there's a 34% higher sales and revenue. And I think I'm rushing through my slides, but as I told you, I really keep it short. If you want to know more about this, please give me a call. We are doing this for several clients now here on Curaçao, but also clients focused on Colombia, and it's really working really well. So get into contact with me, and this is my part of this webinar. So I give you the presentation further to Farin.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes. I hope you can hear me. Let me see, let me share my screen. Yes. Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm a tax director from Grant Thornton, and I'm very, very glad to be here this afternoon. Let me see. I think I have here the check. Yes. First page of today. Yes, as said, I'm glad to be here today. I've been working in a tax practice for 24 years and in Curaçao. And today I will be sharing with you some highlights, important highlights on the profit tax legislation related to export. Yes. As you may know, the Curaçao tax legislation has undergone several changes, and this had to do with the fact that the legislation had to be brought in line with requirements set by the OECD and the EU. Let's say tax regime which were considered harmful tax practices were abolished, and then you can think of a regime such as the export regime and the e-zone regime. And that is why we have a new legislation now. If we look back to see how the legislation was until December 31st, then you can see that companies in Curaçao were taxed on their worldwide income. This means that the profit tax in Curaçao is 22%, was taxed on not only domestic income, but also on foreign income, foreign source income. And the legislation included specific exemptions to make sure that, for instance, profits from permanent establishments abroad were not included were actually exempted from profit tax. Starting January 1, 2020, the Curaçao tax basis has been adjusted in the sense that instead of a worldwide tax basis, the profit tax is now subject to, is only taxed on domestic income. So we now have a territorial profit tax regime. And then the question is actually, yes, but what is actually considered as domestic income? Now, domestic income is revenue from income generating activities in Curaçao, actually carried out in Curaçao, and those activities are connected to assets situated in Curaçao or rights in Curaçao. And examples of these activities can be, let's say, well, actually the activities which relate to movable or immovable assets are subject to 22% profit tax. As said, starting January 2020, only domestic income is subject, meaning that non-domestic income is not included in the Curaçao tax basis. Important is that in the explanatory notes on the legislation, it also says that passive income is considered as domestic income. And with passive income, we mean dividend income, royalty income, rental income, meaning if you have, let's say, the leasing of equipment abroad, in principle would be considered as passive income and therefore subject to 22% profit tax. Important, very important is that costs related to domestic income will not be deductible. With this, you can actually conclude that the 𝗗𝗂 profit tax makes three distinctions. You have the first one is that distinctions made with regard to domestic income, which is taxed at 22%. You have non-domestic income, which is not included in the 𝗗𝗂 tax basis, meaning that it is not subject to 𝗗𝗂 profit tax. And you have a situation where you can have mixed income, meaning a company has domestic income and non-domestic, domestic income and non-domestic income. In a situation where you have mixed income, the profit tax determination will be based on a formula whereby the direct and indirect costs will be taken into account. Also important to know is that also a reduced profit tax rate of 3% was introduced. And this 3% profit tax rate is introduced for specific sectors. The idea is to stimulate certain sectors in 𝗗𝗂. And one of the sectors is actually the construction of or maintenance and repair of vessels and aircrafts, but also supportive services provided by data centers or call centers. Warehousing is one, and you also have fund management services. A very important aspect in the 𝗗𝗂 profit tax legislation is a substance requirement. The substance requirement is very important for companies that want to qualify or apply for the non-domestic income, because non-domestic income is not included in the 𝗗𝗂 tax basis. The substance requirement actually means that the companies in 𝗗𝗂 must have actual presence. And with qualitative and quantitative substance, we mean that actually means that the companies must make sure that they have sufficient employees, but also qualified employees in line with the nature of the activities of the company. And it is also important to have sufficient local recurring costs in line with the size and nature of the activities. With respect to non-domestic income, there's also an additional requirement, and that is that the company must meet the permanent establishment condition. And with that, I mean actual presence. I will now discuss some structuring opportunities for the services export. The first structure that I would like to discuss is just to actually give a further explanation of what I just discussed. Here you have a situation of a local shareholder, in a local resident which has shares in a 𝗗𝗂 company. The company provides two types of services. One is focused on providing services, local services, and the other is that the company also provides export services to Colombia. Under A, the local services would of course be subject to 22%, but the services, the profits generated with services provided to Colombia are not included in the 𝗗𝗂 profit tax basis. The shareholder, the resident that has shares in the 𝗗𝗂 company If that person receives dividend from the Curaçao company, this dividend is subject to 19.5% income tax. And with regard to services, it is also important to check the aspect of, to see what turnover tax consequences this would have. The local delivery of goods and services in Curaçao is subject to either 6 or 9% turnover tax. But when we're talking about export services, then there is the turnover tax legislation has an exemption for export services. So there would for export, for delivery of goods, and with regard to services, there's also there also wouldn't be any levy of turnover tax if the consumer of the service is outside, is abroad, and the service is actually enjoyed, consumed abroad, and takes place abroad. And the legislation also mentions the type of services which would not be subject to turnover tax in Curaçao. And one of the services mentioned is IT services, telecommunication services, advisory services, management services. In this situation, as I said, if you have a company that exploits not only local activities, but also export activities, you have the situation where you have to look at the expenses, because only, let's say, expenses in relation to foreign income are not deductible. Well, they may not be deducted for profit tax purposes. So this results in an administrative burden because you have to keep track of your of the expenses. Here we have a structure of, here we have a, oops, yeah, here, yes, here we have a structure with a holding structure with a Curaçao investment company. A holding structure gives more flexibility because, well, with a holding structure you can the situation where you have not applied yet for the Curaçao investment company, the holding structure can it is possible to use, or at least structure, that you have a fiscal unity between the companies for profit tax purposes, and also dividends from the Curaçao BV to the holding will not be subject to taxes because the participation exemption applies for profit tax purposes. We do not have a dividend withholding tax in Curaçao. And in the event that the holding BV would apply for the Curaçao investment company status, the Curaçao holding BV would not be subject to profit tax because there's an exemption, or at least the profit tax rate for the Curaçao investment company is 0%. And in case the holding BV has the status of a Curaçao investment company, dividends, well, actually the resident, the local resident shareholder in that company would be taxed on deemed income at an effective rate of 0.78 instead of the 19.5% income tax which was shown in the first structure. Another important aspect to take into account is the fact that, as I said, in principle, there will be, if in the event of internal transactions between the companies, this could lead to the levy of turnover tax. But of course, there are ways to, to avoid this, and one of the ways is to conclude a cost-sharing agreement between the companies. Yes, the third structure which I would like to discuss with you is actually also a holding structure, but in this structure you have as the holding entity, or the holding entity is actually a private foundation. A private foundation is exempt from the levy, or at least the profit tax rate is 0%. And if a local person is the ultimate beneficiary of a private foundation, and that person receives income from a private foundation, this income would be subject to 19.5% income tax. Important to know is that there are requirements to qualify as a private foundation, in the sense that the private foundation would not be subject to profit tax. And most important is that the private foundation may not operate an enterprise. But it is clear that in case a private foundation holds shares in a company, then this is not considered as an enterprise. Also important is that when a local person transfers capital into a private foundation, then 25% gift tax would be due in Curaçao. If this would be done by a non-resident, then there would be no gift tax implications in Curaçao. Thank you very much. Basically, what is important of this presentation, or what is important for the listeners to know, is that the profit tax legislation has changed from a worldwide tax basis to a domestic tax basis, meaning that non-domestic income is not subject to profit tax levy in Curaçao. It's not included in the profit tax basis. Of course, there are requirements that need to be met in order to qualify or at least apply this income as, or to report this income as non-domestic. And most important is that that the company must make sure that it meets the substance requirements.